so I will like this. Microphones? Is it done?
Yeah, it's open.
Just this one?
No.
This one? Ah, okay. And how can I see if... this is on, this is both on, yeah? Okay. Oh, I see Vaido, my colleague from Tartu. What a surprise. Hello, Vaido. I was already afraid that we have lost all the online participants, but thanks God, at least some old friends are here. So, hello and welcome everybody to the Impact Investing workshop, which is co-organized by Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform. And my name is René Tönnisson. I'm a thematic expert at Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform, working for the area of SME competitiveness. And apart from my engagement with Interreg Europe, I'm working on daily basis with making investments into startups. So I'm responsible for 4 early stage pre-seed funds in Estonia and in Latvia. And the impact investing topics have become also increasingly important in my own professional life, and that's why we suggested to AGORADA to co-organize this workshop together and to look at the current good practices and future trends on impact investing in Europe. Before I will make a short introduction on the topic of today, let me also briefly discuss the future of Interreg Europe program, as well as what will happen with the policy learning platform, because I was asked by my colleagues from AGORADA to share a bit of light of the future, as you know, the one program is coming to an end and another one is about to start. But before doing that, I have this, Vaido knows very well, I have this very, very bad habit of not being always serious, but telling some jokes or stories. So some stories are true, some stories are just jokes. So while listening to the previous panel, there was a discussion about optimism and pessimism. And of course, this is a very relevant question. What will be our future outlooks? Are we looking at it from optimistic or pessimistic perspective? And the story is that, do you know what is the difference between pessimist and optimist? Well, the pessimist says that the situation is so bad it can't get any more worse. And the optimist says, yes, it can. So let's see if we are in a situation when things can only get worse, or there is a chance for improvement as well. Starting with the short introduction of future of Interreg Europe program, which is for the next 7 years, then there basically key objectives and approach remains to large extent the same. So there is no revolution in Interreg Europe coming, but it's more like evolution. There will be changes, but they are not radical and paradigm changing. If you look at some of the key basic components, and due to the Brexit, we have now in future program 1 country less, but at the same time the budget has been increased a bit. But if you take into account inflation, then the budget roughly stays the same if adjusted to the inflation. Then instead of 4 thematic priorities, which were currently the basis or foundations of Interreg Europe program, in future there will be more priorities and one main cross-cutting priority on capacity building. But as you can see from this slide, there are also new components or new topics, for instance social As you know, Interreg Europe was not really dealing with social issues and with citizen issues and governance issues directly, but those are now possible for applying in terms of project ideas and focus areas. However, the main focus still remains on a smart and green transition. About 80% of the total funds is supposed to go there. In terms of some of the main features, then it will be less focused on structural funds. So only one policy instrument per project is enough. Only one partner needs to have, at least one partner. It is also more flexibility in different phases of the project, and action plans will in future depend on core phase results, so it is also a change. And perhaps an interesting change for those who really like making real things happen. Pilot actions are now possible from the very beginning. I mean, you can start immediately piloting from the beginning, don't need to wait. And if we look at the timelines, and the program is currently being finalized, and hopefully it will be approved during the next first half of the year. And already the first call is also planned first semester of next year. I have even heard that it might happen that the first call will be launched before the final approval by the Commission. So this apparently seems to be possible, and so you can be prepared that in about half a year or so, hopefully first calls will be announced. Now, if we're looking at the future of policy learning platform, and for those of you who are not very familiar yet with policy learning platform, this is an additional value-adding service to Interreg Europe framework, which helps to capitalize and add value to the project results and consortium. And it remains to a large extent very similar to the current service offer. So we have a knowledge hub, community of peers, and expert policy support as three main service areas. As you know, behind every program, behind every scheme, there are actually concrete people. And I'm happy to just share the slide on those people who are providing this thematic expertise in different areas. And I'm also happy to use the opportunity and introduce my colleagues, Mart, who is working with me on SME competitiveness, and my colleague René back there, who is responsible for our communication activities, just for your knowledge. We do have a lot of resources, both online, which consist of good practice database, policy briefs, policy digests, and there are some of the examples what has been recently done and which are available for making it more concrete. We also organize a lot of events, so I want to promote two of the upcoming events. One is about Industry 4.0 and digital transition, and another one is a big Europe Let's Cooperate conference, where I hope many of you will be able to join. We do also have a number of schemes which help regions and organizations to get tailored support, which is a way to bring together experts from all around Europe and to provide advice on a specific issue. We have matchmaking sessions, which are a short version of this type of policy advice, a couple of hours, and then peer reviews, which can take up to 2 days. Just a couple of examples on existing, already implemented peer reviews and matchmaking sessions across Europe, which have been implemented during COVID and before that. And of course, all of you are most welcome to find out more, and if relevant, apply for this help from European. Let me now turn into the topic of today, and before giving the floor to our distinguished speakers, we have 4 today, I remembered another joke, and it's an old Jewish joke, and in a small apartment in Jerusalem, a man called Joshua is trying to fall asleep, but he apparently has no sleep, so he's turning around in the bed and making his wife also very uncomfortable. So wife suddenly asks that Joshua, what is your problem? Why don't you sleep, and why don't you let me sleep either? And Joshua is saying that you know I borrowed 1,000 shekels from our neighbor Moisha, and tomorrow I need to pay back this loan. But I have no money and I can't sleep. I don't know what to tell to my dear neighbor tomorrow. And the wife gets out of the bed, goes to the wall, and then bangs as loudly to the wall and shouts at Moisha, Joshua borrowed 1,000 shekels and tomorrow he needs to pay you back, but he has absolutely no money. And then he comes back to the bed and says that, my dear husband, now you can sleep because now Moisha can't sleep anymore. And that's a situation which, if you look at what's happening in the world today, you can draw an analogy that the business models and ways of investing, how it has been currently, it's to a certain extent has been borrowing money from the future or future generations, and then kind of giving the responsibility to the future generations as well, that we are not going to it's not the problem of the current, but it's problem of the future. And indeed, in that context, impact investing comes as a very valuable paradigm to kind of address those challenges which the current financial system is facing, and also connected to the future of our planet. So as you know, impact investing as a concept is not a new one. It has been around already quite some time, but if you look at practice, it's still relatively limited. There are very few pilots, there are very few mainstream instruments, and it's really a kind of minority in the financial paradigm. It is also very varied in terms of different approaches and different type of financing, from loans to bonds, and it's based on a very, very different business models, which all form a kind of impact investing a paradigm and discussion. However, if you consider the goals for our near-term future, which was also discussed in the plenary session, so if we want to achieve green and just transition at the same time in coming years, we probably need to have a paradigm shift in investing as well. So it doesn't suffice with existing traditional investment instruments. And the current workshop is therefore aiming at looking what is already available in Europe, what has been the results of some of the impact investing instruments, and then more importantly concentrate on the discussion of the future, that what will happen and how we can make it more common in coming years. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and if you have any request for advice or proposals for cooperation, we are always here to meet you and to discuss you from the Interreg Europe Policy Learning side. And having said that, I would like now to invite our first speaker, Alexandre, who is the lead partner of InnovaFI project, to share some of their experiences and results of the project in this area. So let's take this slide. So perhaps there's can
leave it to the experts.
Yeah.
So first of all, I'll take the chance to welcome you to this session and thank you for inviting us. It's a pleasure for us to be here. We entered the InnovaFI project, well, it's been set up, from a romantic standpoint. Exactly the same idea that is behind the goals to learn, but we are all in this together. It doesn't matter if one region in Europe is very competitive. This is a joint venture between all European regions. And if we forget this...
Alexandre, I probably need to ask you to sit there.
Oh, yes.
Online participants cannot hear you because they might...
So they are the lucky ones.
Yes. They can,
It's still connecting.
the good news is that we have now more online participants than physical participants, so we finally have arrived.
The bad news is that it's stuck.
We are not online anymore. It's like, so, yeah.
Not enough broadband, start cutting down online participants.
Necesitas entrar.
Sí, pero.
Because of the internet connection. So we're going to have to log in again. We apologize for this. Nobody, okay, not.
¿Esa es la de ahora? ¿La última que he puesto?
No, es lo que me enviaron. Es que hay como un...
Espérate, que a ver si la cambia mi compañero y eso no es.
So I don't know, maybe in the meantime you have questions for Interreg Europe?
Yeah, let's, I mean, as the time is running, so let's do the following. Alexandre, let's continue with your presentation and we'll do it, I mean, you can now speak freely as long as we are not online, and once we get back to online, then we can, I mean, put your microphone.
That's always nice not being recorded, because I have a high propensity to over-exaggerate on the jokes.
Well,
being quite pushy in this type of joke. So I was telling you, when we entered and created the InnovaFI, we were looking for new ways of improving financial instruments and financial instrument systems. The context of consolidating innovation system like the one in Portugal or Spain is usually an unbalanced one. We have made a significant push into creating a scientific backbone to human capital to jumpstart innovative entrepreneurship. But as it is normal, there is an asymmetry between the fast pace at which the university changes in response to incentives and the capacity of the renewal of economic talent. And so
¿Quieres su PowerPoint?
a second issue that is very common between Portugal and Spain, this is why you are here. We follow
Espera, ¿cuál es?
Eso es.
¿Este es?
everything is about banks. Or even if it's not about banks, it will end up in banks. This means that we have a high dependency of a conservative way of thinking about financial instruments. So when we think of when we think of we need to innovate and find new solutions that have higher impact, in the end of the day we go for either guarantees or new types of loans. We try to be innovative as a financial guy would be. So we have traditional loans and then we have mezzanine loans. Or mezzanine something. And we go for quasi-capital, which is quite innovative in the sense that quasi-capital is not, it's the hybrid perspective, so I need to also have this. So it's the hybrid perspective of electric vehicles. So we have gasoline, which is the debt, and we have electric power, which is the equity part that comes from the quasi-capital. So we were facing the challenge of thinking how we could improve our own systems. And we then realized that our problem is a common problem across Europe. And when we look at statistics, Europeans invest in proportion more in Kickstarter in the US than in the opportunities of funding in their European market. So when we say about venture capital and equity, that people don't invest because they don't know about the investment, there is some kind of information asymmetry, that is relevant, but somehow we prefer to invest on the other side of the Atlantic rather than here. This is also about European culture. And this is a common problem for everybody. And this is, again, a personal feeling I can be, since I'm not being recorded, or at least I'm not online yet, I hope. Oh, I am. I can be very inconvenient, I will anyhow. We have a major problem in Europe. We are like an old couple that they cannot stand each other anymore, and they don't communicate, and we are not evolving. And we are still discussing the children of the future, but we are not discussing our common problems, and we have a major problem. We need to increase confidence among each other and need to consolidate this partnership, which is a great ideal, but we have been losing momentum for the last decades. And we see this. It's not just about Brexit. We see this about the I don't know how they will call it for Poland, or they will call it for others. But we are seeing this challenge. And we cannot ignore that we face this challenge together. If one of the nuclear power stations in Spain explodes, I will be dead in Portugal. So I need to be worried about it. And the same for the economic fabric, the same for the new challenge that we face. And we face, I would say, three major challenges. One is, again, to have some kind of saying in the world innovation. What we see is that we have bold statements, and I think that the first statement comes from the year 2000, that we will reach 3% of investment in R&D. And what happens is that we are still struggling for it. If you look for statistics on average, we're pretty much the same 20 years after. And our next goal, let's do it in 2030. We are also struggling in the second area, which is environment. We are leading across the world because we have a greater conscience, and this is a cultural thing. This is the diversity and the history behind Europe gives us a great edge in comparison to newer countries like the United States. We have that backbone of history. And maybe that allows us to have a more eclectic, more open vision regarding some issues of the world and regarding sustainability. And we are taking this very seriously. But this will be a major challenge, because what we feel is that we need to find the right incentives to have impacts. I'll give you another joke, which is real. In Portugal, we introduced a 10-cent tax. And taxes can be financial instruments as well, for plastic bags in supermarkets.
And it's 10 cents. People are spending 100 euros in the supermarket, so they can easily spend €1. But they are not. They rather carry it like this and go out in ridiculous figures rather than pay 10 cents, and they spend 50. So we need to understand that the incentives and how we can target and fine-tune the instruments to actually have a saying, actually have the impact. And before having the impact, and René asked me to talk about the impact, and I'll do it later, we thought that we have an initial impact before, which is in the design of the financial instruments. And I was saying, when we entered this was about a romantic vision that we still need to be in love about European Union, about being partners, about collaborating with each other, about exploring the benefits of these type of platforms for mutual learning, for exchanging experience to learn from each other and doing better in our own countries and better for Europe. So we tackled innovation, we tackled sustainability. Oh, I will not be that fast. In Portugal, I'm known as the Portuguese Fidel Castro. So bear with me online. The third challenge is about talent. And talent has two things. First, we are an aging Europe and we'll have issues. And secondly, we need to have a novel economy that is attractive to maintain talent. Because what we are observing is that the talent from Portugal is leaving for Germany, for France, because they can pay more, they have better opportunities in this area of high-tech. But what we'll find out is that the talent in Germany is going for the US because BMW and Mercedes lost the train for electric vehicles, and Tesla is in the front. So this is a common problem. We are not cannibalizing ourselves. We are in this together. We are on the same boat. If someone sinks, we all die. So we are running the Titanic. So going back to the point, I was trying to give you the context of Portugal and most of the partners of InnovaFI. We have 7 countries there, and most of us have very little experience in innovating in financial instruments. Our idea of financial instruments, let's create another loan which has some kind of beneficial tax interest rates. Or let's try to boost equity. And so what we did was to create a wholesaler system that would then fund, including with subventions, equity funds. And those equity funds would fund companies. What we see then is that those equity funds are going for mid-level risk companies. So we are not being able to have the right impact in terms of pushing higher risk, higher potential, disruptive and transforming companies that pave the new path of growth. And so we tried to come up with this project to help us understand how countries like Portugal that are still learning on how to set up an innovation system, how can we now reach the end of improving the transformation of that knowledge and that human capital into value locally. We have become very good at producing human capital, and that this is one of our great exports. We are exporting it to Germany mostly. Not against Germans, but in the last 5 years we exported 3,000 engineers to Germany. The problem is that Germany is supporting us in developing, and then we are supporting them in developing for the next 30 years. Again, it's not against Germany. We need to find a system that is unbalanced. We need to find financial instruments that actually provide opportunities. Secondly, we are all aware that the grant schemes from European Union have limitations, and we look for financial instruments to try to identify policy tools that have a greater multiplier effect. This is the reasoning behind the reimbursable schemes, and this is the reasoning also behind this type of equities. We have different stages of financial instruments, and again, in a schizophrenic way, I'll give you the example that exists in Portugal, exists in Spain, as we learned from other partners, is that we look for this, and what we see, okay, we need to launch startups, so we put our money in this area. When you reach a certain level of revenue, you have lots of private agents ready to invest. So the problem is here, in these first 2 segments. And what you observe is that Portugal, Spain, and many of our partners, we invested, or we try to invest in business angels, try to invest in seed capital, creating or leveraging existing private operators
Dear guys,
to invest
you
them
muted the
more.
speaker.
Sorry? Someone is complaining already. I told you. But when we're doing this, we then created a schizophrenic solution, which is we launch lots of startups, but when they reach the point that they need to take off, we don't have money to support them. So between the 500K and the 2 million euro ticket of investment, we have no one. It's the desert. It's schizophrenic because we supported them to create the idea and they have the proof of concept. We know it works in theory. Now let's try the market. No, not now. But then we'll tell them, as soon as you reach 2 million euros of turnover, come and we'll invest again for scale up. So we are losing in the middle of the... Can I continue?
It seems that there are online participants, there are some problems to solve.
And we have feedback. I'm a great singer, by the way. So we're trying to come up with... Now this doesn't work.
Very sorry about that.
To the online participants in Christmas, only see Julianne's Sound of Music, Farewell, Goodbye of Evdokia. This is not working today.
Would it be better if Alexandre would sit? Is it helping? I mean, if you use like microphones instead of...
Is this better? Is this better? Can I continue?
So why do I shaking hand?
I am a narcissist, but I don't like that much to hear my own voice. Okay.
Let's try. Why though? Is it now better? Oh, great.
It's better. So yeah, but the PowerPoint is stuck.
And you're Alexandre out of time anyway, but
I'll be fast.
You have a few minutes to wind
I will try to be fast. I'll continue. So we set up a schizophrenic system that is very good on the ends. So it's good on the first part, it's good on the last part, it's terrible on the middle part. And this type of imbalances also created the need for us to think of novel ways of setting up and deploying these instruments. How can we innovate? How can we target better? How can we aim for greater impact? And this is what we try to learn from our partners in different areas. What I have, probably it's better to forget about the rest of the slides, I would say.
You can still put them.
If you can put them, that's fine. If not, I will improvise. Does it work?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the first thing that we understood is that we have a major problem in matchmaking, because although the ecosystem is small, we try to identify some solution, not the traditional platform. This is it's owned by the government, but a solution that created identified the opportunities, promoted the meeting, and then had a collateral by the states in order to fluidify the investment decisions of the risk capital there. So we bridged together startups, universities, and financial instruments operators. And within this platform and this operation, we provided a direct approach of the state in terms of instrument, because we understood that the wholesaler perspective that we tried before, that is, we are creating in the first generation, let's make it clear, first generation we created a wholesaler institution. This wholesaler institution would then fund venture capitalists and banks to provide loans for high risk ventures. We understood that this was not working and we needed to control it better, but we are the state, we are the government, we are not supposed to intervene so much. So we created a platform that is mostly online, which the government supports and monitors regularly, and where we facilitate this matchmaking and this process, and then we fund directly these companies we co-fund directly these companies and these operators to support this. So we are still having issues with this. We're not sharing. Eventually we'll get it right. So work with me. So the first instrument that we tried was to create this bridge. We needed this bridge. We still need some kind of intermediaries that compensate for this adversity in the market. When you have venture capital in a shallow market like the Portuguese one or the Spanish one, the demands of that venture capital become too high in order for companies to be attracted to. We also created what we call Financial Instruments Lab. It's about experimentation. It's about creating it's like a think tank, and then creating new financial instruments, small prototypes, like the proof of concept, to try to understand which have the better impact. So in order to innovate in financial instruments, we understand from the 3M platform what people are in need, what are the gaps, what are the failures, but we don't know how to approach them. We need to learn. And we tried a solution which is, it's like a fab lab, but for financial instruments, which is trying to come up with prototypes of instruments and testing a little bit of burning money. So setting aside a couple of thousands of euros and let's burn the money and let's test a more radical approach on this, a more radical approach on that, and compare. If you want, it's a good way of using the theory of change that is behind the impact logic that I was asked to speak about, and to create this. As you can see from the activity, this is it's not a think tank from the state. This is a collaborative platform, a collaborative group that works on the design of the instruments, discusses how to do it, and then we have an experimentation. It's like a real-life simulation, so in a small scale, but allow us to have great lessons learned and then improve from it. Going for impacts, we have Portugal Ventures. Portugal Ventures is the national operator that then feeds directly companies that are more innovative. They operate on 6 areas, from industry to technology applied to tourism. And in the upcoming years, this allowed us to have 110 startups funded. The impacts of that startups are quite significant, since we are reaching our 5th unicorn. You're asking about impact. For a country like Portugal, having 5 unicorns is actually great. The only unfortunate thing is we generated unicorn and now they are moving to London or other financial area. But not the backbone of the production, but the financial headquarters, etc. Those are all moving except for one. But we were able, through overcoming these barriers, to have greater impact in terms of the way we are setting up financial instruments. For us, it's very important about the architecture, design, and the implementation. And I think that the best practice that we can show is this idea of experimenting. We tend to think that instruments should be perfect, and then we go for conservative approaches. I will complete with 2 different, we have other schemes. For instance, in CFID, it's a tax credit with 82.5%. This allows people that have 1 million euros to pay for income tax to deduce 830,000 euros if they invested in startups that have R&D. So I'm telling you, you are going to burn 1 million paying your taxes. You can risk 170 and have a stake of 1 million in a company that is emerging. So this has actually created a boost in terms of the financial instruments market in Portugal. What we are suffering from is the fact that we still need to boost the impact on these companies, accelerate their growth. And we are going to do this while following two basic stuff. One, public procurement is actually very relevant on some areas. And the second one, trying again to come up with sequentiality instruments that smooth the transition of companies between the seed capital and the remaining stages. We always have this issue. And the state will provide collaterals through all the stages up until the final scale-up, where private's already very open to invest, in order to facilitate this process, which is usually an interrupted process along the way. So finally, in terms of impact, and going back to René's initial words, and I've taken too much time, we usually take decisions that are bound and biased by our own time perception. I'll give you an example to be clearer. if you were a French guy in the 17th century and someone would say that they would spend that much money in building the Louvre Museum, you would say that was crazy, that's ruinous. If you see it on a very long term, that was a great investment. It shaped or contributed to shape a more knowledgeable society, and it's a money-making machine today, but not then. And we are biased by the emergency of having impact tomorrow. It's better to go for longer-term impacts. And for this, we are always talking about de-risking policies, de-risking the investments of private equity, etc. That is an important, but let's assume that it's also about risking, it's also about burning money, and we should experiment. We should take greater chances. And this, again, is a challenge that we all face together. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandre. And due to time limits, I'm not sure how many questions we have, but perhaps we can keep some at the discussion phase. So let's move to the next speaker, who is Evdokia, and René will help us to put up the slides.
Hello, Ido. Nice to see you. Thank you. So good afternoon to everyone. Nice to be here. I find the conference and the first sessions really very interesting for us. But I will also give you my, let's say, experience with our Road-CSR project, which is mostly dealing with corporate social responsibility. But first, a little bit of who I am. I'm coming from a different background from, I guess, from all of you. I'm mostly basically working with rural development and the areas and the small communities and towns. And what we try to do with my development agency is to develop the area, to diversify, for example, the economic activity, try to promote some new ideas, some new innovative initiatives, and also as a funding agency, we try to also fund different small projects, not 20 billions like the European Investment Bank, but really small projects from 20,000 euros maximum to 200, let's say, 1,000 euros. And a little bit about Cyprus is this small dot there in the northern eastern Mediterranean basin, a really very small, let's say, country that is actually has a service-based economy. We are, except from the tourist sector, which is quite high into the GDP, we are also providing all different services that they are connected with financing and investment, like banking, accounting, legal, telecommunications. And we are actually the bridge, let's say, between East and West, and that's why we have, let's say, a reputation of an international financial center that we are, let's say, differentiating from the different financial centers with a lot of reasons why someone should come and invest in Cyprus. About the ECG, well, we first heard this in Cyprus in 2016. And after that, it started to evolve, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic that reinforced this need to move to a more, let's say, capital flows, to more sustainable projects. And the government is trying now to commit with the SDGs and is working to apply different financial criteria and some regulatory frameworks in the policy making. And also its contributions to the discussions of developing an ISO for sustainable finance. Hopefully, we think we will have it by the end of 2021, so it will go also into application. About the Road-CSR project, we started the first idea of corporate social responsibility when it came out one directive by the European Commission in 2014 about the big companies that they should be reporting their non-financial reporting. But when we went through the directive, I was actually speaking about big enterprises that they have more than 500 employees and an annual turnover of 40 billion. So what about the small medium business that they are the core actually of the European Commission, and especially in Cyprus, is 99% is small business and family business actually. So we came up with a project of how we can, let's say, start to inform and start to train and start to, let's say, speak with the policymakers of how we can apply the CSR into the small, medium enterprises. It was a long way. When we first started, we were thinking, no way, the business and the policymakers, they didn't even know what is the concept of corporate social responsibility. But slowly, slowly, it seems that it's gaining a lot of interest, especially because it's connected with social investments, with human rights, with consumers, with governance. So it's a very holistic approach. And we are also continuing with the fifth call project of Interreg MED, because now what we have seen during the COVID pandemic from a lot of research is that the companies that they were actually applying corporate social responsibility, they were more resilient, they would be able to alleviate these negative consequences from COVID-19, especially because they are more focused on the human aspect as well and the society as well, giving back also to the society. So one of the tools that we find during the good practices that we're investigating was the social responsible tool, because actually there was a need of how can a small, medium company can evaluate or at least have a benchmarking of where it's standing with ESG criteria, or if someone that wants to invest, how can at least assess this in order to consider these factors, the ESG factors, as a part of on the investment decision. Someone also will come to ask, okay, why should the company be thinking like that? I mean, mostly the companies, we know that when they take decisions where to invest, they think about profit. And of course, it's reasonable. I mean, a small, medium company will not think, oh, okay, I will become more helpful to the society or to the human beings and so on. But first of all, it gives you a very good and a better analysis. If you know your performance and you can identify also your risk and opportunities and weaknesses with something that it will not give you the traditional financial analysis. Of course, it gives you a very good reputation for your company, and this means that you have a long-term better performance as well. You have a more holistic view of the different metrics and about the risk management, and of course, you're offering to a better world, to better positive engagement for better environmental outcomes. So we had these two, which actually it's very simple. It's 28 questions, which it can be either entirely interview-based or if you want, if you're an investor and you want to see what is doing another company, you can also look at their websites, at the CSR reports if they do, or if you want to make a first, let's say, connection with the stakeholder and start to discuss. And it's up to you to give your different benchmarking. You can put your own levels. And the final scoring gives you one idea of where you're standing concerning your sustainability performance. It tackles 6 different areas: the governance, environment, sector sustainability, human health and safety management, supply chain management, and community management. The questions are scored between 1 and 7, and this is transformed after with a percentage. And also with this tool, there is a very good methodological guideline, so it can guide you step by step when you do the interviews or when you're collecting the different data of how you can put them into the tool. The tool was actually, in 2011, the Cyprus Chamber of Commerce was participating in a European project, so it developed, let's say, a pilot tool, which it was tested by 5 companies, which they said, wow, it's actually very easy to do it, and it gave us a kind of information that we needed and we didn't have in mind. Some companies even said that I didn't know I was doing some ESG practices, so it gives them a very good input on that. Then it was further developed, and it was taken by the CSR network. By today, there is more than 40 companies that they are using it, and big companies, actually. These are companies that they participate in the Cyprus CSR network, and now they are thinking to make a third, let's say, version of this tool by including more questions based on the needs of the companies. And the fact that it's applicable to different sectors and you have comparable results, this is, again, one asset of this tool. The lessons learned, actually, we find it that, as I said, It's a tool that gives you this insight into your social and environmental decisions. You can have first someone doing the screening by using the tool, and then they validate these, let's say, results with the discussion with the different company representatives. And also it gives some investors to go even further and conduct a more further financial and risk investigation further from what the tool is giving. So there is a lot of benefits actually when you're using ESG criteria. It offers you a very good opportunity for competitive differentiation, for resource efficiency. You have much better communication and synergies and goodwill with your different stakeholders. You are also able to use your most talented employees, and this can increase your productivity and being a more sustainable business, and creates more confidence to the quality of the management of the products and the services that you offer. And I would say that moving forward, of course, the European Commission has launched different initiatives, different financial instruments that they can put us to be more responsible investment. So I see a future there, and I see also a very good opportunity from Interreg Europe that is continuing and is giving more focus also on the social aspect. But I would say that even though we have we have tools and we have all these regulations that slowly the countries are putting, we need somehow to educate our entrepreneurs when we speak, especially for small, medium enterprises, what means social investing, what means to apply ESG criteria into their decision making, and how they can also do a corporate social responsibility. We need to put money there for education, for changing the mindset, not only of the SMEs, but also of the consumers, because are the ones that they are the drivers of this economic activity, especially for impact investing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evdokia, for a very interesting presentation and also keeping the time so well, which I can't say about all the speakers.
I tested many times and I was keeping the...
Stay there because you have now 2 extra minutes for questions.
Yeah, perfect.
There is a question from our common colleague Vaido. So
hi Vaido, nice to see you.
You can please speak up and ask it directly. We saw it in the chat, but you can also ask it.
If you can hear me,
yes,
the others can.
Yeah, Vaido, I can hear you.
Yeah. The question to you, Evdokia, about were there any methods or tools that accelerated or sped up the process within the SMEs of actually integrating and starting to use those CSR or SDG principles? Or did you immediately get them to use the SRI tool? Because, you know, saving the planet and world is all big and nice and beautiful words, but in everyday business life, the pioneer and more pragmatic decisions often come first. So did you use any concrete methodology or technique to get especially the smaller and medium companies on board?
Well, I will agree with you that most of the companies, they think profit-wise. I mean, when we try to let's say, try to make them some CSR strategy, the first thing that they said is that, wow, this is time consuming. It's going to take us a lot of time to do it. Wow, but we have to put a lot of money on this. So it's also, money-wise, is not good for us. And what it will be, what will we gain from that? So with the CSR project, we put our university coming from Norway, and it make a very simple study explaining to the companies what kind of benefits they can have from having a corporate social responsibility framework or trying to apply different tools for social investments. So we tried to bring them together with the small workshops, and again, you have to do a lot of training with them. It's the only way. Imagine that even the government was not very well aware what do we mean with corporate social responsibility. So what we managed to do with the project is at least we find some funding that it was not absorbed to give at least some funding for companies that they wanted to do things to make some CSR strategy. Something that it came out from the discussions was actually that the companies were doing some CSR practices, but they were not aware of that. Because they always thinking that CSR is corporate citizenship, like giving some money to a school or for children, for example, for vulnerable communities, but this is not the case. It is very linked with the core of the company. I'll give an example of a company, an industry in Cyprus. For example, we have a cement company, small medium cement company, that it was located in rural area in between 5 small communities. And when they established there, all the villages, they said, no, we don't want this, big company here. It will be a lot of pollution in the area and so on. So that made the company to think, how can I give back to the society? It started to hire people from the area. It made a very big investment during the years to put filters that they can have absorb this from the cement company. You have a lot of emissions to decrease the emissions. It was giving back to the villages as well, giving scholarships, helping with if the, let's say the schools needed some equipment, they were giving to them. Between the 5 years, the reputation of the company went up, and immediately the sales of the company went up. So what is a key is to have a very good synergy with your society and with your stakeholders. And for the SMEs, because they don't know that, you need a continuous education and continuous workshops and to guide them through this. So this is actually how we did it with the project.
Thank you so much. Do you have any further questions? If not, in the room. Anybody?
Have you thought about if you would somehow incorporate these principles, corporate responsibility, in the evaluation grid when you are, let's say, funding the projects of the companies? Let's say you are managing authority or responsible authorities. Did they have, let's say, any objections toward, or they were open for that kind of, let's say?
It's a long way until they are more open to that. In our projects, even though what we fund projects, imagine that we don't have any criteria. I mean, to give an extra point if someone is having a CSR, let's say, strategy. Unfortunately, no. I hope that in the next call of projects, because now the concept of CSR is growing and is getting a lot of interest, and because it came this directive who make it obligatory, even for the big enterprises, now the policy makers are really starting to make the first thoughts, but it needs a lot of push. Unfortunately, we need a long way until we put criteria in the different investment projects when we fund them and give them funding from our side.
So you need to work on both sides, I would say, on a policy level to
Exactly.
discuss with the policy makers. And
you need to prepare both. Exactly, you need to prepare and the beneficiaries so they are able to make a good proposal that is having ESG practices inside of CSR practices, and at the same time to prepare the policymakers so they can fund this project and give them an advance. They try to do it with public procurement. I mean, when the local government is making some public procurement to put some criteria there, but that is just the first step they did. Thank you for being here.
Let's move to our next speaker, who is Tracey from Ireland.
Thanks very much, René. Tracey from Ireland is enough, which is lovely.
I suppose you could say a few words about yourself.
Thank you very much. Thanks, René, and it's lovely to be here and lovely to be invited to speak. Tracey Hannon is my name, and I'm with an organisation called Clann Credo. I'm regional manager for the Western region. So what I'm going to do is just to outline a little bit about who we are and what we do, and also in view of the subject matter of this workshop, I'll talk to you a little bit about impact and how we look at it. So we're an Irish-based charity which provides social finance to the community and voluntary sector, and we were established in 1996. Initially, we received 10 million in investment from religious charities. So we're quite unique, I suppose. We're an unusual organisation in many respects. So that investment was 10 million at that time. And then in 2007, so we continued along, but we would have run out of money because the demand from the community and voluntary sector for finance, which typically, to give you an example, would be that the loans that we provide would form part of the cost of a project. So it could be the renovation of a community centre or the development of sports facilities. And there may be some element of grant funding. Very often in rural areas, which I'm from the west coast of Ireland, and my region would be the west, the north and the northwest, and kind of into the Midlands. And we would have, I suppose, we've quite remote population. We have a lot of people living in small towns. Our largest population centre is Galway, which is 30,000. All of the other towns are a lot smaller than that. So basically we're a small population, rural population. So many of the organisations that we work with would be in receipt of some funding under LEADER, under the LEADER programme, and would have received that, or Sports Capital, or other more state-funded and EU-funded programmes, which are administered through the Irish government, through development agencies on the local, on the ground, on a county-by-county basis. And we, I suppose, have very often, to the most part, have worked hand in hand with those development agencies and with the community and voluntary sector that needs, and we've kind of responded to those needs over the last 25 years at this stage. And those needs have changed in terms of what organisations have a requirement for. When we started off, we were giving loans of up to about 50,000 over a maximum of 7 years. Now we're doing 500,000, 600,000 over up to 20 years if it's a social housing type project. So it can be very much depending on what the requirements are of the community and voluntary sector. And I suppose we have a certain amount of flexibility because our funds are coming from the private sector, so we're not bound by the state in terms of a certain criteria. As I mentioned, and I went a little bit off tangent, in 2007, following a paper that our organisation put together with a number of other organisations, we put forward a case to Irish government, policy document, looking for support really from the banking sector, on the basis that I suppose that we were addressing a market failure in that finance very often was not available to the community and voluntary sector to develop very basic community facilities, community infrastructure that would serve children or disadvantaged youth or the elderly, etc. That was something that we were able to kind of put forward, that case. The result was a levy that was placed on the banks, which is managed by what's called the Social Finance Foundation. Initially there was 25 million, then a further 70 odd million, and now we're into the next phase of that over a 12-year period. So that worked really well in order for us to have a sufficient line of credit, because that's like a wholesaler of funds, and we, being the retailer, then making the finance available to the community and voluntary sector. So we are the largest social finance provider in Ireland, but there's not very many of us. I just wanted to give you, I was asked for this, I suppose we are a national organisation. The area that I cover is the West Northwest, which is a region, and it's up there along the west, the northwest coast. Just to give you a little bit of context of the area that we cover. It's quite rural. I mentioned that Galway City would be the largest urban area within that region, and you're looking at 37%, nearly 40% of the land mass, but 16% 0.5% of the population. So, you know, that just gives you some kind of idea of what where we are. I suppose in terms of what we were established to do, we're really trying to enable local communities, local organisations, community and voluntary organisations to address needs, and we're providing the finance that they need, coupled with other finance, coupled with fundraising, coupled with whatever they're generating, maybe from the rental of facilities, or maybe it's social enterprise type operation. It could be a community theatre, it could be AstroTurf pitch that's being charged at €50 an hour, or whatever it is. So we're trying to enable organisations to address needs within their own communities. And we're part of that solution. And we kind of work with them and work with other organisations to enable the organisations to achieve that. I gave you one of the photographs there. That one at the bottom is an AstroTurf pitch that was built with funding from a community wind farm project. So it was a wind farm that was established in the local area. There was a pot of money that was provided as a community benefit fund, and the organisation had a certain requirement for funding. Now that was going to be administered on, I can't remember the exact amounts, but you're looking at maybe 10,000 a year over a couple of years. So they had a combined requirement of a kind of bridging facility to allow them to build the project up front, and then a term loan to provide the match finance, and we were able to facilitate that in that particular case. That would be one in the area that I'm involved in. North Wall Community Development Project Creche, this would be more of an urban project based in Dublin. Let's see, so I suppose just to give you the context of social finance as we refer to it, as, you know, we're looking at repayable loan finance, we're looking at socially minded investors, and we're looking at social outcome and repayment capacity. And because of the sector that we deal with, and because of the organisations that we concentrate on, and we don't lend to the private sector, it can be quite easy in some respects to define the community benefit. Because generally we have a legal structure which is called a company limited by guarantee. There's no share capital in that. The organisations, and typically within their memorandum and articles of association, would have certain clauses in terms of, if the organisation was to wind up, then the monies would be put into some similar type organisation which would have similar values to this organisation. You know, so there's certain kind of restrictions that we have. We also lend, by the way, to a parish council, or to, you know, an unincorporated group of, or to a sports club with volunteer trustees. But again, we're fairly confident that the organisations that we're lending to, there's no beneficial interest. There's nobody who is going to benefit directly from the investment that's being made. It is very much for the community. So I suppose that allows us that freedom to know that the organisations that we're lending to at one level are, you know, that there is a social benefit inherent in the fact of their legal structure and of their purpose and of the reason that they exist. A little bit more challenging on the repayment capacity because of the types of, and that's the gap that we're filling. Because we have organisations who are, you know, who have members' draws. We have organisations who are fundraising. You know, they're going to be running the Santa Run now. It was cancelled last year, but hopefully they'll get a double whammy this time. You know, we've got the double, we've got the online lotto, we've got, you know, that kind of thing, and that's actually, it would form a large portion of the repayment capacity. And very often these activities are very well established. They could be there for a long number of years, and may not. They could be it could be a new operation. So, because of the space, I suppose, that we work in, and when we say the community and voluntary sector, it's a very broad church. Like it's you know, it can be anything within that sector, as long as it's as long as they are creating a social benefit and there's the repayment capacity, then we can lend to the organisations. 150 million we have done to about over 2,000 projects, and everything, as I said before, from on the larger scale, the social housing, property purchase, right down to small amounts of loan finance, bridging facilities against grants, and small amounts of loans where there's a small shortfall. So it's right across the spectrum. That particular one is a community renewable energy project which we were involved in. And there's a couple of the types of areas: recreation and culture, addiction and counselling, community facilities, social housing, disability, enterprise centres, community-based. And as I'm sure you all have, we've had a number of the ones that we've worked with over the years have now discovered a renewed interest in their facilities. They want to do a bit of an upgrade with remote working and with people having the option to maybe work and base themselves back in the places that they were originally from. So for rural areas, that particularly has had a very positive impact. So that's really repeating what I said to you already. I suppose one of the areas, of course, that we're very interested in focusing on is environment and the environmental space. We've been involved with a good few organisations who are providing, again, community-based organisations who are delivering, retrofitting for houses, community centres, solar panels, and solar farms on a small scale, not the large scale, because we're not at that level. We're not doing the multi-million euro investment that they would require. But the community-based ones we can certainly look at. And again, we try to structure, and I suppose, and as I said already, we have that freedom to be flexible and versatile. We have a voluntary board, and if we are able to bring the information in terms of what the requirements are from the ground to that board, then they're very open to looking at the demands that are out there. And what we do is we've created these kind of dedicated loan funds, which works really well, just from the point of view of even branding and I suppose shaping the funds that we have. And also, I suppose it just makes it a little bit clearer for people and for organisations that they can kind of see themselves as being more sports related than community related. And it's how we view ourselves as community and voluntary organisations. We do term loans, bridging loans, as I mentioned already, particularly against fundraising, but more typically against grants. Any of the EU grants. And many of the government-administered grants have followed suit. The monies have to be spent before they can be drawn down. Evidence of the monies having been spent and that can be a huge issue for a small organisation. So we can provide that facility, and that is something that really was a game changer, I suppose, from the point of view of organisations and groups, and in terms of our own volume. In terms of the numbers of inquiries and the amount of demand that we had for the service that we provide, that was a huge game changer a number of years ago. I suppose two things that we are very strong on: that we don't look for personal guarantees. We feel that organisations and groups who are providing of their time on a voluntary capacity, that should be enough, and we've really stood by that position. And we have had individuals and people who have said, look, I don't mind a bit, we're used to that, but it's something that we have been very strong on. And many people have really appreciated that, because it is a step too, and sometimes it is a step too far to be asked to personally guarantee a loan or a facility when it is for your local community and you have no beneficial interest, etc. That it really is something that's quite altruistic in terms of your purpose and the idea behind it. And another thing that we do, and we're strong on this, is that there's no penalties for early repayment. So you have to offer the community and voluntary sector that flexibility, because sometimes a donation may become available. Sometimes the fundraiser might be more successful than was anticipated. Sometimes at the end of the year there might have been available funds from some source that has been channeled to this organisation. Allow them that, my experience is that the organisations that we work with, we might have started with a small loan, maybe 10, 15, 20,000, and the confidence builds. It starts with a Tidy Towns project, which is just a bridging loan against an approved grant. Then they say, well, maybe we'll do a multi-use games area for the children of the area and a playground, and that becomes a 100,000 project. Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll do a housing project, or we'll do a day centre, and there is actually that, that does develop. We do see the repeat business coming through, and it's very rewarding to see that, because that there's an element of confidence. The interaction with Clann Credo could have been the first time that an organisation ever encountered debt as a group. Individually, fine, but as a group, they may never have encountered debt. And so it is something that, as one of the speakers said on the earlier panel, money is a tool, and it's a tool that can be used to develop facilities, and it's also a tool that you can use to gain confidence. And I think that that's very much proven with the amount of repeat business that we seem to get. I've mentioned this already. The bridging loans to future commitments, which would very often be fundraising commitments and secured grants. And then what we do in that respect is we charge an interest rate. We don't receive any state money. We're completely independent. So the interest will cover our overheads, our staffing costs, any of our costs, and also allow us that provision for bad debts. Fortunately, that's very low. And I believe that, when the community and voluntary sector engage in debt, it's something that they have considered long and hard before they decide to go down that road. And usually, it may be a struggle for whatever. I mean, we've had COVID, and we did a huge amount of restructures. I think we were maybe 50-60% of our loan book had to be restructured because most of the facilities were closed, so there was no income. So we did that. We deal with it and we move on, and we try to come back. Now, most of them, bar a couple who were probably experiencing some difficulties prior to COVID anyhow, are back on track, or back on a track. So that's good for us. The term loans that we provide, capital expenditure, matching finance for grant funding, financial restructures, as I mentioned to you before, sometimes the personal guarantee can be a huge issue for individuals or for organisations. Sometimes an organisation just really is stuck with the arrangement perhaps that they have, and it's just not working for whatever reason. And sometimes it makes more sense for us to take on the existing debt and be the only lender, rather than there be 2 or 3 lenders in the equation, because at least you've got a little bit more of a handle on what's happening. That's that bit. I gave an example there of a lovely project in B Park Community Centre, which is in Leitrim, which is in the northwest, and it's an organisation that we've worked with maybe 3 or 4 times. They right back at the beginning when they developed their community centre, then they needed to expand it, and they now have a childcare facility in there. They have a men's shed, they have childcare services, they have the offices of some state bodies, which gives them a nice kind of steady rental income. They have a large hall in the good times, and prior to COVID that was used for bingo, and it was used for all kinds of activities. And it becomes the centre of a community. So you're what you're doing is you're creating a facility, or they're creating the facility. We're providing the tool to enable them to create that facility. and it allows for all kinds of activities to happen out of there. So that's an organisation that we worked with, but I mean it would be similar of many of them. I just wanted to make reference to the Employment and Innovation Scheme because we've recently become participants in this through, and I mentioned earlier on, the Social Finance Foundation, who provides most of our finance. And it is providing a guarantee or a counter guarantee, and it's being administered through the SFF in Ireland, but it's an EIF initiative. And the agreement is, it's not with us directly, it's with the Social Finance Foundation. So it applies to loans of up to $500,000, and it's 10 years or the 31st of December 2032. Now, the loans would be unsecured. Some of our loans are secured, some of them aren't. Usually we use 100,000 in 10 years as our guide. If it's beyond that, we're definitely going to look for security. Sometimes it's just not appropriate, and sometimes it is. So we do make a judgment on that on a case-by-case basis. So effectively, the 60% of the loan loss is guaranteed, but it has to be an unsecured loan. And then the balance then is divided between Clann Credo and the Social Finance Foundation. Currently, with the non-easy loans, it's on a 50-50 split between us and the Social Finance Foundation. So we would take 50% of they obviously need to approve the loans that we do. So some of our loans we would have done ourselves. Most of them would be on a shared basis. However, if it's under the easy scheme, then there's 20% is our potential of a loan loss, so it reduces our exposure. And I suppose that what it's doing is it is providing us with the opportunity to consider higher risk proposals. How it will work in reality, it's very early. It's only this month, actually, or the last month, that we've put a couple of projects through the EASY scheme because we had to have certain compliance in place ourselves. But it is, it's something that we're going to have to even work into our own systems to get our head around and to even change our own practices. So we'll see how that goes, So, but I mean, it does, in theory. This has the potential to allow us to do much higher risk proposals. And I suppose you could say that the space that we're in is higher risk because we're filling a gap that wasn't being filled anyhow. So there you go. But I suppose we all have a propensity to risk. René had said to me about the impact measurement. I think that it's still hard not to crack, in terms of measuring our impact. I mean, we do we have a social dividend heading in each of our evaluation papers. We do an analysis of the benefits that are going to be created by the investment that we put in. We look at the Sustainable Development Goals and we kind of tick which ones are being approved. We have, and I just cut and paste what we would use on one example of a project, maybe the number of residents, if it's a housing project, the number of jobs created, and some of those jobs could be government supported jobs through various schemes that exist. We might be looking at the number of volunteers, we might be looking at the number of, youth that are using the facility, the benefits to health, etc. Well, and it can be quite subjective, so it can be quite difficult, I suppose, in terms of the analysis. But I think that's something that is it's always going to be a challenge when you're trying to do an analysis of the social impact, because it is quite particular at one level to the organisation that you're investing in. And then social audits, we've conducted, I suppose, 4 or 5 of those every couple of years. It's probably something that should be done on an annual basis. So that's something else. What works and what doesn't work was another thing that I was asked to look at. I suppose our area of expertise, and we're a small operation, we have 12 staff in total. Myself and my colleague are based in the West and the Midlands. We have 2 people in the south of the country. We have 2 people covering the East, and then the rest will be more on, on the loan dispersals, compliance, admin, and so you're looking at a very, very small organisation. But I suppose what we've done is we've gained our experience and our knowledge base is the community and voluntary sector, and we know that's the space that we need to stay in because that's what we know. Okay, when we started initially, way back in 25 years ago, before my time, there was investments done in the private sector, and that didn't work as well. It's a different skill set, so it's very much about knowing your space, I think. And other challenges that we've had, enterprise units, enterprise space, has been difficult. Many of the organisations that we've worked with have, I suppose if you were to look at a particular area within the community and voluntary sector that we've had more difficulty with, it certainly would be the enterprise units, enterprise space. Again, because you're really dependent on external factors, you can't kind of go into the community group, that have the 8 units and say, go out there and get, if people don't want it, they don't want it. If it's in the wrong location, or if it's just not meeting the needs, or if it should be more food-based and this is more technology-based, whatever it is, then, it's just a little bit more difficult. Now, the remote working has provided has provided opportunities for some enterprise spaces. I suppose our future plans are continue to address the needs and to continue to adapt and evolve and to continue to support the sector that we work in, and to create new, whatever financial models that we think will meet the needs of the organisations that we work with. That's really what we want to do, what we want to continue to do. So I hope I haven't gone over time, René. I'm sure you'll tell me. Okay, I apologise. Sorry.
That's fine. Thank you, Tracey, for
Thank
such
you.
an inspiring presentation. Do we have any feedback or questions, either from online or physical presence?
I have a question. Well, Tracey, thank you. I want to say, by the way, I'm coordinator of the Interreg Crazy project, which is a project where Clann Credo is a start to practice, I would say. And yes, it's true, and And for instance, our Swedish partner already is trying or doing its best to replicate this model in Sweden. So this proves that the policy learning platform and Interreg Europe in particular is successful in achieving policy changes and real policy changes. This is, well, the publicity is a lot, but my question for you is, you already said that due to the pandemic you had to reschedule or restructure, I think you said 50% of funds because of course the facilities were closed. But I want to ask you, for the new enquiries you received during the pandemic, did you see a difference between that type of enterprises, new social enterprises that people wanted to create?
I think that we will see it. I think that it's, first of all, thank you very much for your kind words. You're very good. I think that we will see it. There can be a time lag. As I mentioned already, a lot of the organisations that we work with would have an element of grant funding, okay, and that allocation may have already been secured, and it was in place, okay, and now they were looking to develop the project or to get the thing up and running or underway, and so it probably didn't have the impact that it should have, that it could have. Because of that kind of time lag. What has happened, and this is a combination of COVID, Brexit, and I shouldn't have, we got away with not mentioning the B word there for a long time, but I've mentioned it now. And there has been a huge increase in materials and in the cost of goods. Particularly building materials, and also there's shortage of labour as well, which is a big issue. And there are some figures of maybe up to 30% in terms of increase in costs. So that has created a different type of requirement. some of the organisations perhaps that we might have provided approvals for that were stalled because the construction sector was on hold during COVID or for a period of it. They're now ready to get going, but now they realise that they've a 30,000 shortfall in funds or 100,000 or whatever it is, and they have to kind of reconfigure where they're going. So that's bringing its own challenges, and but that's something that we're just dealing with on a case by case basis, and you know, what do you do? You know, that's the way that it is. Sorry.
Thank you, Tracey. Oh, sorry.
And which is the debt return or the fallout, especially with the crisis? Do you have a percentage of the amount of money that you've lended out and doesn't come back?
Let me see. We, in terms of you mean through COVID? Do you?
No, in
in
previous or
okay.
COVID?
Yeah, in general. Let me see. I think. Let me see. I'll just try and remember the figures now. I think we're looking at 26 million. Say from 2018 to 2020, we're about 26, 28, 30, or around that each year. So maybe slightly different. Maybe it was 32 million in 2020. So we're on the upward trajectory, certainly, and it's continuing to increase year on year. So the demand is certainly there. The demand certainly exists. You know, we do have a lot of challenges. For example, you know, bank interest rates are very low, they're completely on the ground. We don't, you know, we're not. We have to charge a rate that will cover our interest and that will cover our overheads and will cover our cost of funds, because we're paying an interest rate on the monies that we borrow. So our interest rate is about 5.45% for our term loans, 6.5% for our bridging loans. They're generally out for such a short amount of time. There's more or less the same work involved. So we do have those kind of challenges. So, you know, but that's life. So that's
and morosity?
In terms of write down, is it, or in terms
no,
of
morosity? Morosidad? Morosity?
When you have a deadline to pay
and they don't pay.
Oh, moratorium, is it?
Yeah, moratorium.
Okay. Oh, yeah. No, we have. Well, I suppose that's what we. Different loans have different requirements, and so sometimes we'll work in an early stage moratorium. So you know, if it's a construction project and the organisation, you know, it's going to take 12 months for this to be developed, for this facility to be developed, then we might work in, you know, an interest only payment for the first 12 months, or you know, something like that, or 6 months. Through the COVID pandemic, we provided moratoriums. A lot of organisations could either only pay interest, or they paid nothing, or they paid a very small amount. So you know, we work through those kind of situations as we can, and it's all done on a case by case basis. So you know, I suppose you know, 11 or 12 million, you know, that I'm dealing with, you know, and my colleagues would have, you know, we're just minding those, if you like. There's a relationship built, and so we try to just manage what the requirements are, what the needs are, and address the issues as they arise. And you know, my experience is that once the organisation once they're given that little bit of forbearance, and once they can get over that issue or the problem, they just want to get back on track, you know. So, and some organisations, you know, adapted so well, you know, they moved everything that they would have done on a face-to-face basis online, and it proved really successful because people were at home, and they were using their phones to, donate to the community, or they were using them. They were living in London or Paris or Valencia, and they were donating to the football club in North Galway, because that's where they had the connection, and because it was all done. So in a way, the world became quite small, and in some ways, there are obviously the face-to-face was a huge gap. So.
Thank you so much, Tracey.
Okay, thank you.
Last but not least, let's move to our last speaker, who is online, Viktorija. If she's still with us, can you hear us, Viktorija? And can you put on your screen and microphone?
Hi, yes, I'm here, and I can share my screen if it's possible.
Yeah, please share your screen.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we can see it.
Can you see this?
Yeah, we can see it. Oh, excellent. Go ahead.
So, hi everyone. I'm Viktorija from Coinvest Capital, venture fund, which is a little bit different from traditional ones because we are backed only by state money, and we do not have private investors in our fund, just because we attract private investors at the level of the companies. And a little bit about Lithuania, because we are not a region, we are a country, and we have 2.8 million citizens. Our GDP is 48 billion euros, and GDP per person is 5,000 euros. Unemployment rate is quite low at the moment. It's 7.5%. And yes, we have a problem with really good specialists in Lithuania. So we have a problem not with the unemployment, but we have a problem with employment at the moment. And on the screen, you can see a little bit of statistic data in which ratings we are. So I think that we are quite in a good company with other European countries. So we are at 11th place of easy doing business, and for example, 16th place in economic freedom of the world, etc. Today I will talk more about financial instruments because, as I noticed, first speaker from Portugal, he was indicating a lot of things about financial instruments and the difficulties how financial instruments are doing in the country. I can say that in Lithuania, we do not have a lot of problems with the financial instruments because we started to implementing them from 2008. And we started with microcredits, we started with some kind of guarantee instruments, and then we moved to venture capital instruments. And at the moment, we have quite a lot of financial instruments in Lithuania, but mostly of them were implemented by Ministry of Economy and Innovations and Ministry of Social Labor. And then we decided in Lithuania that we need to implement more financial instruments in all areas. So it means we need to educate more ministries to move from subsidies to financial instruments if it's possible. So we decided to create an instrument with the Ministry of Transport, and under the operational program priority 4, which objective is reducing carbon dioxide implementation in urban areas and promoting various types of urban mobility and measures. So we decided to create an instrument, financial instrument, and venture capital instrument in this area. And here is a scheme. Just because we had, before the implementation of this instrument, Coinvest for transport and communications, we had a similar instruments, but with a different investment strategy. So I'm representing Coinvest Capital, which is a fund which is managed by Cofinansavimas. It's a general partner in the fund, and we have only one limited partner in the structure, and it is Invega, Investment and Business Guarantee. It is national promotional institution which invests structural funds money and governmental money, national money, through this fund. So this scheme could look quite messy, but in reality, it's quite a simple scheme. We have one LP, we are general partner, we are implementing funds, different strategies, different sub-funds, and we invest this money through our SPVs alongside other investors. Mostly of these investors are business angels. And we have two independent bodies which help us to implement the fund. So we have investment committee, which has 3 independent members from the market, which help us to make a decisions to invest or not to invest in startups. And we have the advisory committee, which consists from Invegas, from our LPs people. So here you can see our team members. So on the left side, you can see a core team. So it's a management team, which consists of me as a managing director, investment guys, and on the right side, you can see investment committee, which is independent, just because we are state fund, and the market doesn't like to have a state investor in the companies. So that's why it was decided that we need to have independent investment committee members, which are voting to invest or not to invest into specific companies. So in a total, we have our fund size is 28 million, but when we are talking about sub-fund, specific sub-fund for transport and communications, so this sub-fund size is 4 million euros, and investment strategy is to invest into innovative transport services and products, into startups based in Lithuania. We invest only alongside other investors. We can't do our investment decisions only by ourselves. And we do this under state aid regulations. And we have a possibility, we have different strategies to invest under general block exemption regulation, Article 22, or the minimis regulation. Also, we have possibility to invest under no state aid. It means that in a pari passu basis, so equally with other investors. What is the aim of our measure? So we are willing to promote carbon reducing in urban areas, to promote sustainable urban mobility, and implement measures to mitigate the impact of the environment. And goals and objectives of our instrument is to develop the community of business angels, because I think that Lithuania was the last one from the European countries which created a Business Angels Network. So when we created our fund, After that, we initiated the creation of Business Angels community. Also, one of the main goals is increase the R&D activities in private sectors, improve the access to capital for companies, and of course, with this specific measure, we want to induce the companies to create mobility services and products. What we propose for that, we lead all the investment process. So it means that when companies or business angels come to us with an investment proposal, we take the lead investor's role of that. So it means that we negotiate the terms of the investment and everything. We are negotiating on the investment agreements, etc. We can invest up to 70% of the investment. So it means if company needs, for example, 100,000 euros, we can invest up to 70,000 euros, and we need at least 30% €1,000 from private investors. Our investment size from the fund side is approximately 300,000 euros. So it means additionally, approximately 150,000 euros comes from private investors. And the main benefit for the private investors is that we cap our investment return. It means that if we invested, for example, 100,000 euros, and we have an exit after 3 years, and our shares are worth 3 times more than we have invested. So it means that we will take back only our investment amount. So it means 100,000 euros plus 6% compounded annual rate. So it means if we exit the company after 3 years, it will be around plus 21,000 euros. So it means that we will take from this investment only 121,000 euros, and the rest amount, which was earned, will go to the private investors. And our last exit earned for our investors X34 instead of X9. So it's a quite good deal for private investors. Our investment targets, if we want to invest a higher amount, we need to invest into micro and small enterprises up to 5 years. If it's enough to invest up to 200,000 euros, we are going under the de minimis regulations, so we can invest into micro, small, and medium enterprises, which doesn't fit to state aid regulations. All fund results, during 4 years of activity, we had connections with more than 600 companies. We made 70 due diligence processes, and we have 25 deals with 100 business angels. And if we talk about our Coinvest fund for transport and communication, at the moment we have only one investment just because we started our activity 2 years ago. We invested into Imbalance Grid, which is a company which provides software and hardware for slow charging decisions for electric vehicles. And we invested with 4 business angels and additional fund. And the total investment is 2.5 million euros. And 1.5 million euros came from our fund. And at the moment, company has working stations near one office buildings and uses friendly software. And now they are expanding, and they are expanding to other European companies. And I hope that this company will be, really good example. How can companies act in a such situation? And lessons learned, as I mentioned, we have a different sub-funds. And as I mentioned that we have 25 portfolio companies under this fund, but only one from this Coinvest for transport and communications. And why? Just because equity instruments in a small region can be focused on a small sector. And it's always no-go if, for example, we are talking a lot of about biotech investments, for example, in Lithuania, and specific biotech operation. I'm a little bit skeptical because it's really hard to find enough companies which can fit your quite narrow investment strategy. And especially your requirements for the specific measures are too narrow, so you do not have a possibilities to improvise with the investments. So you are a little bit stuck with some regulations. And yes, the mindset that we need to move from subsidies to financial instruments is still alive. I can't say that in Lithuania it's a really deep problem, but it's still alive. And when talking about the future of this instrument, Coinvest instrument will continue, but I think that we will elaborate a future of specific funds, which has specific sector and investment strategies, related with European regulations, state aid regulations, and specific sector regulations. But I hope that it's really good instrument, and I know that now a lot of countries are connecting with me to have a conversations how to implement such a kind of instruments in their countries. And I'm open to help everyone and every country to learn more about this instrument and to take a minute to think about the implementation of these instruments in your countries. So I was quite quick. Thank you.
Viktorija, for your excellent presentation and also for your promise to help other interested parties in this process. Any quick final questions to Viktorija before we close the workshop? If not, then I would like to take the opportunity and thank all the speakers for their presentations and sharing the experience, what is already happening in Europe in the area of impact investing. However, unfortunately, we didn't have today the time to go into the future of impact investment, which was also one of our aims. I do hope we can continue this discussion on the future during our dinner and in other meetings, because this is certainly very, very important topic. And from your Interreg Europe policy learning platform, I believe we will come back to impact investing topic because it's increasingly important. I would like to also take this opportunity and thank all the participants, both those who are still here in this room and who were kind enough to stay here, even if we are already an hour over the initial time. And of course, I would like to also extend our gratitude to online participants and my dear colleague Vaido, who in Estonia it must be already 7 o'clock as I see, and he's still there. So thank you, Vaido, for supporting us with your presence and putting up good questions. So what happens next in terms of today's program? As you know, there will be a bus leaving 8 o'clock to the dinner. So you have 2 hours to go back to hotels, refresh yourself a bit, and then join us for dinner at the bus at 8. And tomorrow, some of you perhaps know, we are also having a matchmaking session, which is about connecting those regions and organizations who want to set up impact investing instrument and those people who have already experience. So I very much invite everybody also to join tomorrow in this room and share an experience with more experienced and less experienced regions. Having said that, thank you once again, and let's give a big applause to all speakers and participants for today's session.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.